Hello. What is a shroud? That's a question that has come up recently, and I'm here to answer it today. It's simply a piece of material that you wrap a dead body in, and then that piece of material is known as a shroud. It can be something that is deliberately made out of all sorts of different types of material, usually organic, bamboo, or something like that. But it can also be something as simple as this, a white sheet, cotton from your own home, or maybe a favourite piece of material that you have, whatever it is, again, cotton, something that is compostable. Now, that's interesting because it brings up another issue about whether or not you can have a shroud in a cremation or not. I'll come on to that in a minute. But the reason that I'm bringing this up in the first place is because of what happened with my uncle recently. He had died and he had left strict instructions to me as his executor that it was to be as cheap as possible. And I knew that a shroud is likely, not necessarily, but likely to be less than a coffin. So we were looking at direct cremation, which is when there is no actual funeral, there's no service, the body just gets taken to the crematorium and is dealt with there. But I rang the crematorium to ask them, would they accept a body in a shroud? And they didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't have a clue. In fact, they tried to tell me that it was a legal requirement in the UK that a body had to be in a coffin. Now, it may be their preference and it may be what they need to do as funeral directors, but it's not a legal requirement, and that's really important to know. So, on the back of this, in my Facebook group, and you'll find the link there if you're interested in joining, I thought I would find out what would people prefer. Would they rather be buried in a shroud or cremated in one, if that's possible, or would they rather their body be placed in a coffin or a casket and taken care of that way? And it was amazing the number of comments that we got and what emerged as a result of that. And it really made me realise that I needed to answer this question: what is a shroud and what does it mean if you want to have your body taken care of like this? So here's a few pointers. Let me look at my list to make sure we get everything here. You need to know that with a shroud, i.e. a piece of material just wrapped around you, it is going to show the outline of a body. That's just the way it is. And depending on the thickness of the material, it will show that outline more than other types of material would. So a thickly felted shroud wouldn't show it very much, but a piece of cotton would. And that can be quite shocking. I remember when I first saw somebody who had chosen this method, and it was like I could see her head clearly defined. And when that has a piece of material over it, that is a bit like, wow, that's a bit in your face if you're not used to it. So that's something to be aware of, because if this is a choice that you're making, you can let your family and friends know beforehand that that's what it will look like. And there's some pictures here so that you can get used to it as well. You can help the impact of that, of course, by choosing or creating a shroud yourself in a thicker material, because that will naturally help. Okay, what else? You need to check if you want to be cremated, you need to check if your local crematorium will accept a shroud. Now, many of them don't, because first of all, they don't know about it, but secondly, a shrouded body needs to be on a flat plate, and that plate needs to have something at either end so that when the body is put into or pushed into the actual burner, the incinerator, there is something for the funeral director people to push against. Otherwise, they would be pushing directly against the body, and that's not okay. This isn't a problem, of course, with the coffin, because they're pushing against a wooden box, so to speak. So that's one reason to check. So your wishes may be defined by what your local crematorium says that you can do, and also the burial ground. They may not be used to it either, and that's really important. So this is part of the planning process. And indeed, you can go and visit a crematorium or visit a burial ground and familiarise yourself with all that, and with the staff there as well. Okay. What else? You need to think about the environmental impact of what it is that you want to do. For some people, this, of course, will be more important than others. Even if you do decide that you want a coffin, you might decide that you want one that breaks down more easily than another. If you want a shroud, it will need to be something that is natural, that goes in the earth. So these are things that you really need to think through in advance and will help you make a decision. What else? Let me see. Is there anything else here? I think that's probably the main things, because if there's a lot of other things that came up in this discussion in the Facebook group, but they are really the subjects of other posts. So, yeah, the subject of other articles, because then I can go into them in a bit more detail. But I hope that's helped you to give you the kind of information that you need in order to be able to make a conscious decision about whether you would want your body wrapped in a shroud, a piece of material, or placed in a coffin.